Welcome to Overnight Wisdom, a show where we sit with change makers, artists, business leaders, and thinkers. Each conversation is an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, and unearth the quiet insights that shape who we are. If you're seeking honest reflections, unexpected wisdom, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to not merely survive, but to thrive, you're in the right place. Today's guest is Chidiebere Ibe, medical student, trailblazing illustrator, and a global voice for representation in healthcare. His work is deeply intentional, illustrating not just anatomy, but humanity. You may know him from his now iconic image of a black fetus that rippled across the world, awakening a much needed reckoning in medical education and beyond. But what you may not know is the story behind the arts, a story of grief, faith, unshakable purpose, and a refusal to wait for permission. In this episode, we speak about the intersection of medicine, art, and social justice, and what it means to draw the unseen with spiritual conviction. This is Chidiebere Ibe. Hi, Chidiebere. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Thanks for being with me. So I first learned about your work through LinkedIn. I think so many people in countries across the world kind of resonated with the work and your illustration, especially on the black body. And I have since followed what I could of your work and also lifted your work in spaces where I hold, in spaces I engage. Oftentimes, when people are like, oh, what are Africans doing? I'm like, let me tell you about that person and that person. And, Chidiebere also happens to be one of those people I often lift the work that they do. And when I thought about finally putting this podcast into the world, it only made sense that you were on it. So thank you for graciously accepting to being here. And thanks for chatting with me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on the podcast. Look forward to having a great conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. So I'm gonna jump right in, right? Like I like deep questions, I'm not the weather is great, that's wonderful. So we're just gonna jump right into things. And I wanna start by looking at, kind of your origins and inner compass, and maybe just looking at the anatomy of purpose. When we spoke a little while ago, you shared that you didn't really have any type of formal training, but you've always had, this really strong conviction. And at least from my lens, like what I see is that you have a strong calling to make medical illustrations more inclusive. So I guess what I want to start with as an opening question is what was the inner rupture or the thing that you knew that led you to pick up a digital pen? And was there a moment where you realized, if I don't do this, who will?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So I think that was. I mean, taking a step back, that was in 2020 during the lockdown. I felt that that was the defining moment of my life because during the COVID, I was engaged in so many activities, with different um, organizations and people and networks. Then I was also a graphic designer. I had so many skills, so many creative prowesses that I needed to just put forth. Then while I was going through Facebook, I saw this organization called AFAN. So I reached out to them and said, "Can I create designs for you? While you pay me?" Because I was also looking for a sort of income. So and they were like, "Oh, we don't have money to pay you." Then I quickly volunteered to work pro bono. So it was that moment that I met my mentor, Dr. Ulrich Sippy. Then I was also drawing, with pencil and pen. So then with that moment, he said to me, why not go into medical illustrations? Because I see you have an interest for art, you have an interest for medicine, and why not interject both? Why not just bring both together? And for me, I have never thought about such, specialty before. So I was like, okay, maybe it's something I could try. So I picked up an anatomy textbook, which I got from a friend of mine. And while going through the textbook, I realized this is something I can't do because one, I wasn't in medical school. I didn't know anything about anatomy. I didn't know how to digitally draw. So it was a whole complex thing that I'd have no specialty in. So, but I think the redefining moment when I said, okay, regardless, I'm still going to do this, if I'm good at it or not. And then I didn't have a laptop, so I back then I was working in the media unit in my church. So we had access to the media unit, and they had laptops there. So I used to go to church literally every day to start learning illustrations. Then I used to use computer mouse and Photoshop to learn. So in that process, I realized that while learning illustrations, I lost track of time. I could spend like 5 hours, 6 hours doing one illustration. And I was like, okay, maybe I have a thing for this. So in that moment, I realized that so this was a subject that I could find my rooting in. So I started creating illustrations with no particular interest to really make them, diverse. Because for me, first of all, was learning. I needed to know how are these images created. So while learning all of that, I realized that there was something missing. Most images were all white centered, and I didn't have access to good references where I could, rely on references to something to look at and say, okay, I'm creating something similar to this. There was none. It was a difficult process. But then I kept showing up, which was the most important thing about my journey. I kept showing up regardless of if I was doing it right or not. And so I kept putting out the artwork. And I mean, the amazing thing was that I wasn't waiting for perfection to share my artwork with the world. So at my learning stage, I was always sharing with social media, having one likes, which was my family members. It was a learning curve. So what I realized that in that process was I knew that okay, I was doing something great. I may not see the reactions and everything, but I realized it was something good. And then at that same period, I did an artwork in church. We had like a service where if you are creative, just come out and show your gift and all of that. So I did a painting of Jesus upside down in about 5 minutes, and I think that was the moment I realized, oh, okay, I'm really an artist. And, that kind of like, it's kind of blew up. I had people coming out to give me scholarships and everything. I realized, okay, that means this is interesting. So I had to bring that ability into medical illustration, and identifying that problem was in the moment I just kept doing it. So I realized, okay, this is something I want to do to ensure that people are represented. I don't want to say I'm an emotional person. Maybe I can just say that anyway. But I think I have a touch with humanity. I allow myself to feel human, and that kind of reflects in my artworks. When I'm creating illustrations, I try to think about how does the patient feel when they have the particular disease or condition. So for me, I try to communicate not just medical perspective, but to ensure that there is a touch of humanity.
Thanks for sharing. It's really great to hear the story. I'm wondering, so when did it become apparent for you that you had to like throw yourself into this? Or did that just sort of happen? Or was there a moment where you're like, yep, this is part of what I'm meant to do?
I wouldn't necessarily say that there was a time where I like, oh, okay, this is what I'm meant to do. For me, it was sort of like me trying to find a sense of meaning, because back then I wanted to go into medical school. I had tied everything, purpose and meaning to medical school. I felt like without medical school, without being a doctor, my life is worthless. So everything I did was to the ultimate end of finding meaning in life. Not because I wanted the fame or the notoriety. No, that wasn't part of the goal. So it was just a way of saying, while waiting for your big deal, which is medical school, why not just spend some time doing all of this to help you become a better doctor at the very end? So this is that I was crafting a part to myself that I didn't realize. I think there was a time I created an artwork of the brain, and I had about an unusual reaction on social media, which is not compared to what I usually have often. I was like, oh, why are people reacting to this image? It was just, I think about maybe 30 likes as I did, which was a huge number for me. Then I had a referral from someone to come volunteer for a journal to create design and so I realized, okay, I'm getting a bit of recognition. I think pretty much that's the reason why I just kept doing it, not because I had this eureka moment I realized, yeah, this is what I'm meant to be in life. It was just me trying to, find meaning in life, and here I am. Yeah.
Yeah, here you are doing great work. So I'm also reflecting on what you said in the beginning around, I think about the importance of mentorship and I think about how mentors can sometimes either ask a question or make a statement that makes us expand in how we think of ourselves and the work that we do. And no one becomes an expert on anything on day one, So you talked about showing up and doing it anyway and like failing forward and almost like learning in public. I think there's something quite remarkable in that process, in that you're not waiting for this to be perfect, whatever the idea of perfection is, but you're leaning forward anyway and willing to take that risk, the feedback, both positive and negative and constructive, or just a combination of all of it. And I think there's a lot of bravery in that. So it's inspiring to hear that, and that resonates a lot. Um, Also, you talked quite openly about your faith. You've mentioned church a few times, so I know faith is a thing for you. And when we've spoken in the past, you've also talked openly about how personal loss, in some sense, shaped your path to some degree. So I want to ask you, in what ways do you think that grief and belief in yourself and the work and the purpose that you have in the world right now, in what ways do you think they coexist in your becoming? Because it's an ongoing process, not just as an illustrator, but also as somebody who is shaping how Black bodies are seen and studied and valued.
I think that the most important thing about growth, first of all, is your belief system. And why I say that is because I didn't come from an environment that was all very supportive. And by that I mean my journey to becoming where I am right now. I mean, in my journey to this, I realized that I was navigating life alone, literally. For example, when I tried medical school for 7 times, Nigerian system, you could tell how it's sometimes crazy to get into medical school. And my family was like, your journey to medical school, you are all alone. We're not going to sponsor you to the school. You have to walk and find your way around medical school. They were like, you should just leave this and go into tech, just leave medicine. But for me, I realized this was what I was called to do. Then I think I had to be my greatest supporter. I had to be my greatest belief system to understand that, okay, if my family doesn't believe in what I want to do, then I think nobody else is going to believe other than myself. So belief for me is very integral. And belief there is, it's a big word because it encompasses how I see myself and how God sees me, which I always talk about God everywhere because it was a lot of work to sit down, to study, to become a better person. And I feel like that started from seeing myself and where I came from and to where I wanted to go to. That was an integral part of my journey, redefining my thinking pattern. And for me, grief has also played a big role in my success in my journey in life because when I lost my mom to ovarian cancer on the 25th December on a Christmas, so it was a very sad experience in my life. And I mean, when all of that happened, the day where she was stuck in a pool of blood, and I had to go wash out the clothes. And while doing that, I was telling myself that I'm going to be a doctor, not just because of this, but because of every other person out there who are having similar experiences. So for me, my life has been centered around belief and grief and ensuring that this has been a big driving force for me, ensuring that people have a better quality of life. So sometimes I wonder what I live for. I realize that I live for people basically. I don't know how that sounds, but it's just how my life has been basically. What I do know is that I want to be a person of value. I want to ensure that people are okay around me. And that was the most important thing I said. And now I've seen the blessings of God. And I think that's what has shaped my mindset to be growing to where I'm right now and to doing something that has not really been done in the healthcare space, you know, and challenging the norm, sometimes, and the most difficult thing is, being a young person, being a Nigerian, doing something that's not really common. It's kind of like bring a lot of, backlashes from people. I would say that my belief system plays a pivotal role in my success, and you're also maintaining the success that I have right now.
Mm, thanks for sharing. There's a lot I can get from that in terms of when you say you're a people person, like you live for people and you're creating value through that. I think absolutely. I think what you've been able to showcase through your work, and especially by centering the bodies and the images of people who are often erased and ignored, I think that has caused a ripple. I remember having conversations around COVID, the pandemic, when one of your images kind of blew up, and talking to someone in Norway who was studying to become a doctor and who is still studying to become a doctor. And he kind of reflected on the fact that in all his, practice and practicals or whatever it is they do, labs, he'd never seen a black or brown body, essentially, like not the dummy, not an illustration, nothing. And I think that highlights just the importance of your work and why, it evoked the type of emotions from people that it did. And I can tell you that for myself as a mom, I have two kids. Everything I ever saw about a pregnant woman did not represent me. It wasn't my body, it wasn't my skin, it wasn't me. And it's hard going through such a life changing experience and not feeling represented in that experience, in the resources that you receive from the doctors, from the midwives. Yeah. So I think your work creates value. And I think there's also something you say about being called. And I really love that you say being called, because the thing about vision is like no one else needs to see that vision. I mean, it's great when they do and when they champion it and celebrate it, but ultimately you need to have that belief in yourself. You need to have that conviction. It's great to have the support, but even when people don't see it, that you're able to move, and Chidiebere, move you did, right? Because the impact you had literally the world over is remarkable. And there's so many people, myself included, that are extremely thankful for the work that you do and the representation that you create. Um, and I do want to actually talk a bit about drawing the unseen, right? Because oftentimes medical illustration is seen as clinical, it's quite exact. But your work, because you're a religious person and we're Nigerian, so the spirit moves, like your work moves with a spiritual intention, like when you draw, be it a fetus, a heart, a spine, what emotional truths are you actually trying to restore in anatomy?
Yes, I think that's a very powerful question. Um, because you see, sometimes people ask me this question: "What is different with your art? What is unique about your art?" And it's safe to say, I'm not the best illustrator in the world, but I do know that there is a unique thing about my art is that there is a soul behind my art, and what that means is this: before I create every illustration, every piece of art, I do pray. I think about this in this way: how many patients are going through this, right? Because behind every statistics, right? For example, now I think in the US, black mothers are 3 to 4 times likely to die from birth complications than white women. So behind all of those statistics, where in every is it 1 minute, a woman in LMIC died from cervical cancer. So all of those statistics are basically patient stories, are people who have real life experiences. So behind every data is a patient story. So when I'm creating every piece of art, I try to ensure that I'm not just statistically proving something or anatomically proving something, but I'm also emotionally proving something. That these are real life cases of people who have gone through the experiences. Like, for example, Tourette syndrome, right? It's a syndrome where, a baby, maybe the patient has tics. And there were times people were saying things like, oh, Tourette syndrome is a syndrome that is a white person syndrome. It doesn't affect black people. But I was going through TikTok, I saw a lot of black people who were making advocacies, were talking about cases where they all regarded their syndromes as just a white person, syndrome. So then I realized that, okay, if I create an illustration about Tourette syndrome, I don't just want to create the normal thing they see every time. I want to make sure that when a patient who feels unseen sees my illustration, they will feel seen. And that is why, for me, the most important part of my artwork starts with the thinking process. For example, now when I'm working, I'm washing, I'm doing something, I'm thinking about what I want to create next. I'm thinking about the motif behind it. I'm thinking about the story behind it. So the greater part of my artwork starts with the thinking process around it. And I would say that in the process of creating an artwork, I would say I also consider cultural sensitivity. You know, for example, one of the artworks I've created was on heat rash, if I'm not mistaken. I had to ensure that where babies were given tribal marks. So I had to integrate that a bit in that artwork, to communicate some sort of cultural sensitivity. And also when I'm creating artworks around women healthcare, I ensure to put stretch marks sometimes, because I try to normalize those things and I think that has really been the foundation to create advocacy, to educate people around these, conditions. And it also saddens my heart to realize that if we are training medical students to be, better doctors, to be better at diagnosing diseases, and yet the material, the resources, the dummies, the models, training do not represent them. I mean, it's kind of create that communication gap between the doctor and the patient, because of course medical students will in turn become doctors. So we need to be able to train them with resources that look like them. I mean, for me, that is training in Africa, right? Our patients are predominantly black people. But it's intriguing to know that all our materials, our skin conditions we were studying, look like it just this what looks like on white people. I mean, it's really sad, and I'm working towards changing that. It's a long process. It's a deep process. Convincing the faculty that they're doing something wrong. I think that's the most difficult thing in medicine right now. You know, so ultimately, if we are looking towards improving healthcare outcome for everyone, I believe education is pivotal for that, and not just education, but diversifying education is important for healthcare outcome, which comes to our how the resources they use in training medical students, the hands-on experience they have access to those models. They look like their own community. So I think that's really important in the concept of diversity.
Mm. I think it's beautiful how you depict the human body as it should be, as it is. It is true that a lot of us, even before babies, we have stretch marks. I think it's gorgeous that you think about including birthmarks and tribal marks on like the people that you illustrate. I think there's something quite authentic and unique in that kind of illustration. And as you were speaking, what was also coming up for me was, having two kids in the West and being so terrified. Yes, we have this statistics from the US in terms of the chance or the reality that Black women are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than a white woman. And we also have a similar stats in the UK. But even in the Nordics, and I'm based in Norway, the outcome for Black women, say Somali women, are significantly worse than, say, for white women or for white women who have European ancestry. Like childbirth or just being pregnant and all of that should be one of the happiest times in our lives. But I remember going into hospital just terrified. Just like, I don't want to become a statistics. I don't want to die here. I want to see this kid. And I reflect on that from time to time. And sometimes I feel like I still have some trauma about it that I'm still processing. But my very first experience was so awful. It was so bad. But I think there's also something that fed into that where I never really saw anybody like myself in the messaging I got, in the prep I got going to hospital and hearing from, very kind midwives, because I mostly had a midwife throughout my process. Um, but when I came out of my first birth and survived that and started reflecting on, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this again, not like this. I think that your work, and I would say this to you now because it's true, was also quite important for me to even envision what my youngest, my son, would look like. I had him in 2023, and he felt there was a release that I felt in like, oh my God, like, and I did not know I needed that release. It just felt good to be seen and to be depicted, and I could imagine myself and that child inside me with my skin rather than a foreign image. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I think the work you do in this regard is so important, and you don't I'm sure the best illustrator in the world is the best illustrator. I don't know what the best illustrator is supposed to do. What you do speaks volumes. It's amazing. And so thank you for your work. So this kind of like this resonated for me. So thank you for the work that you do in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
If we talk about the image that sparked joy and tears for me, right? The black fetus. Um, it also sparked global recognition and attention from a lot of people. What did that moment teach you about medicine, about erasure, and about the fragility of dominant narratives? And I just want to layer this by saying, as a Nigerian, you come from a country where you are the majority. As a Nigerian, we're the majority of the majority. And things about diversity, I mean, we have our own challenges, ethnicity, all of that nonsense, but we are the norm, right? And then you create work that has been so impactful outside of Nigeria and outside of the continent and also within. What was that recognizing like, whoa, what is medicine doing? How is it erasing an entire massive group of people in the world?
Yeah, I think when the image went viral, I think it was one of the strangest moments of my life, because I didn't know what it feels like to be viral. That moment where the social media is blowing up, emails are coming in. It holds a whole lot of attention. For me, I'm not really a public person. I mean, I've become that person because of the notoriety and because of the fame. So for me, it was just an image that I created with no hopes of it going viral. But then I had to go to the medical community to understand what is the depth to this image, what is the reason, why does this image speak volume? Then I started going through the comment section, the reactions. The intriguing thing was that I had physicians who've been practicing for like 50 years, and they said for 50 years in my practice as a doctor, I have never seen an image of such. It was striking. It was. I mean, I was shocked because I thought this should be like a normal thing in medicine. People should know these things. I had people who were just literally calling me to tear up and say they feel seen, they feel valued now. You know, then I realized it was a transforming moment for medicine. And why I say that is because medicine is an evolving space, right? There is no end to what we can know. And why that is because that season was that people started asking saying things like a fetus is never black in the uterus. A fetus is only black when they come out of the uterus. And I started doubting my creativity. Did I miss something? Is it wrong? But then I had to, go through a series. I had to do a series called Some Babies Are Born Black. It was a series of illustration to teach people that, okay, medicine is evolving, right? People thought that, we don't need black illustrations, but through that, they started understanding that we need this. It's a factor in healthcare now. Then I started telling people that, no, a fetus can be born black. Not everything is white. So I had to start that series. I had to go into deep research and realize that at the 14th week of gestation, the melanin migrates to the skin. So yes, a fetus can be born black. So because you haven't seen it before, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it was a whole refining moment in medicine. People were like saying things like, "Oh, okay, we love your art, but this is wrong. We love your art, but this is wrong." That moment, they started saying, "Oh yeah, it is true. Not everything is white." What's a transforming moment in the space of medicine? And being the fact that I'm a Nigerian, Doing that, was also a big factor. Something intriguing happened that period because then I was also crowdfunding to go to school, because I wanted to go to Ukraine for medical school. So luckily, yeah, which usually I don't know why I did that. I had to put my GoFundMe link on that particular post for the Black Kids, hoping that people are just gonna see it and donate to my cause. People were saying, "Yes, he's a Nigerian. Of course, they always involve money with everything. It was. Oh God, yeah, it was crazy. I was like, I didn't know this thing was going to go viral. And that means you already made a GoFundMe link to get money from people. It is kind of difficult because of the notion they have about being a Nigerian. And not just that, being a young person also. I kind of got a lot of, reactions also from my fellow arts community where, they're like, oh, he's a young person. We've been doing it for more like 30 years. The world should celebrate us, not him. So it was a moment of gratitude and moment of also thinking, no matter what you do, people don't like you. So, but was exciting to see that I was doing something that transcends myself, something that not just spoke to the black community, but also to the white community. They also saw that, oh, we've been seeing this wrong. Let's also see how to integrate other community of people. So, it's all of that gave me a feeling of gratitude, and I had to just understand that it was a big, big thing for me, and I think that was the moment where I had a lot of mothers that reached out to me and said, how can I support your work? I want to give you images of my daughter who had this condition. Just illustrate this. I want her to feel seen. So it was a moment that's caused a revolution in medicine and how we perceive certain community.
Absolutely. And I think also how people within that community see themselves. And when you were talking about the fact that, people saying, oh, no child is black inside the belly. Let's engage that. But I think this is a thing about privilege. When the whole world has been drafted for you and you see yourself quite often it doesn't even matter if kids are red in the belly. The reality is like nobody, I don't think of my baby inside me and think, oh, are they green or are they purple? Like they should look like me or a semblance of me and their other
Right.
parents, and I think people take for granted the notion of having seen themselves depicted in every space, in books, in media, in medicine, in songs, in the stories that are told. And I think, your work, and this is a thing, like it's turned that on its head. So even though people were coming back and saying, no, 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 at least they have to think about it. It's not just
Right.
the norm that a baby inside or all babies, say whatever color they are, and so should be depicted as Caucasian. And I think there's that beauty in what you've been able to create. And I feel like every racial group should have something, every ethnic group should have something that depicts their tribal marks, whatever it is they carry, because representation is imperative and it absolutely matters. And I'm sorry to hear about the whole Nigerian situation. And, I mean, at also this point, I'm thinking that's getting old. When I hear it from people, I'm just thoroughly annoyed, because this is a country of 230, 250 million people. And, sometimes I'm just like, do you know who Nigerians are? I mean, yeah, about some of the smartest people in the world. Like, what are you talking about? But I feel like this whole thing about, of course, this money, no, just enjoy the work. Just be grateful for the work. So I'm sorry you had to deal with all that nonsense. But I think the fact that you dealt with all of that and still chose to move and still chose to move ahead and create, I think that speaks a lot to, your will that they can't break. And I absolutely love that for you. Um, and I guess especially even to this point on pushback, when you challenge something that has been normalized for centuries. Because one of the things I was thinking about, why hasn't this been done like this in this way, you know? So when you challenge something that has been the norm for centuries, the pushback is inevitable, which is, of course, you've gotten some. How do you stay rooted in the purpose when institutions, not just random individuals on social media, but actual institutions resist the change that you represent?
Yes, I think the beautiful thing about change is that there's always resistance. Not everyone is going to accept change immediately. And the beautiful thing about being a pioneer or being a frontier of something like this is that you should be expectant of, resistant to change. I had a couple of times where people were saying things like, Why does this matter? Why do we need black images in textbook? Why do we have to revise our curricula to ensure that images are diverse enough? Up to now, it's really a difficult thing. And that is why the work continues because not everyone has come to the realization that this is something that is missing. So I have to constantly put out the work out there to ensure that there is a need to integrate this in our educational system, in our institution, regardless of if we accept it or not. And this is the thing. I believe that on the cadre of influence or the cadre of people who matter in code. For example, what I mean is this: if, for example, the Ministry of Health says, okay, in our public health materials, we want to diversify our images to ensure that they cover certain population. Now, it's easy for the Ministry of Education to say, "Oh, okay, Ministry of Health, which is a top ministry, is doing this. Why don't we also integrate this in our educational system? If one body institute this, it's easy for the next body to also want to do this too." And I would say that has also been the good thing about the work because I've had the opportunity to work with big, institutions. So I would say it's a slow process, but it's when you're getting there, it's I think that's also the reason why I do what I do to ensure that it's constantly placed in the hearts of people that there is something missing in this place. So it is really a difficult thing to make people accept. For example, imagine going to your lecturer and telling a lecturer, "Oh, you've been teaching us wrong. He tried to look like this on the black skin." He'll he'll feel insulted. So the better way to making them see that they've missed something is by showing them that they have missed something. So that is why the work has to continue. And the good thing is that patients are also being involved in this. We have patients who are taking up advocacy as a personal matter. When people begin to build community around a problem, we directly finding solutions to that problem. So community building is really important in subject matters like this. So ultimately, I feel like the change is slow, but it's definitely it's happening. Yeah.
Yes, I think change definitely takes time and a lot of perseverance and patience. And one of the things I that resonates for me as I listen to you speak is first being self-taught. You didn't ask for permission. And one of the things I say, even about my process, like I became successful when I stopped asking for permission. And I think I see that also like embodied in your work, in your process, just like, hey, this needed to be done. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm just gonna show you. Because you're absolutely correct that you sometimes showing is more powerful than telling because sometimes when you tell people their egos, their fragility, everything gets into play. And I think what you've been able to create without permission is radical in and of itself. It requires a lot of resilience, right? To fight against systems and structures that were not necessarily built for you or that were designed to gatekeep knowledge. So what? This is how medicine has been done for the past 105,000 years. It needs to change. That has been done this way doesn't mean that it should always be done the same way. So there needs to be also room for evolutions. And then on illustration, I also want to ask you've illustrated quite a lot of different things. I believe you've drawn muscles, organs, tissues, bones. What part of the body do you find most poetic to illustrate? And what does it say metaphorically about who we are?
Oh, interesting. For me, I think I think it's the skin. Why I say that is because when I published my book Beyond Skin, the idea came when I was thinking about can we see people beyond the skin, and if we can do, how does that make the person feel? So, I think whenever I'm drawing the skin, I'm most detailed. I try to zoom in to ensure that I'm getting all the contours, the textures correctly, because I realize that the first thing people see is the skin, not the heart, right? Not the lungs, the skin. But the intriguing thing is that if I'm a heart surgeon, the way I can treat the heart or the way I can do surgery in the heart can be influenced the way I see the skin. Because if I see the skin as his blood, okay, I'm probably going to have a laissez faire attitude towards how I treat the patient because of having a heart condition. So the skin is it's a powerful organ. Create a system where people are seen. It creates a system where people are racially treated illy. It is just the first people see. With respect to other organs, the heart, thank you for all you do. But the skin, I think it plays a pivotal role in how we see people, and I would say that is my favorite organ to draw.
And I think ooh, it's true what you say because oftentimes when we talk about unconscious bias and things like meritocracy or just treating the person as a person in face of unconscious bias, it's just you see the skin and your brain does what it does and left unchecked. That's the difference between life and death for some people. I don't think most people wake up and go, yeah, I'm gonna kill a black mom today. I don't think
No,
that ever is
you're
talked
right.
about, like at least not a medical practitioner, but it happens. That is the first thing we see. And there's a lot of judgment that comes from appearance. Like it could be skin color, it could be whether somebody has a disability. Yeah, it could be so much that is decided by our brain how we engage with those people. But when push comes to shove, especially within the medical field, the first thing anyone sees is the skin. And I think there's a lot of power in, yeah, loving that the most, and it shows as well in your work. When I've spoken to people about your work, like in spaces I hold, oftentimes they talk about, oh, it's great representation. I personally see it as a reclamation, like when you draw a black skin, black organ, or black pregnancy. For me, when I see your work, there's something quite as ancestral to it, and there's something also quite African, but I'm very aware that this could very much be because I know there's an African and a Nigerian behind the pen. Um, you talk about being Nigerian, you talk about that with pride. I think just being Nigerian and having pride is like a birthright that we're just born into the world with. Um, but I do want to ask, and I think you talked a bit about it in terms of like representation and like honoring tribal sensitivities. How does being African inform not just your style, but also your stance and your refusal to separate medicine from humanity?
Of- I think considering the fact that we are the most ignored group, you look at it critically. Africa is a great place. I love being a Nigerian. I'm so proud being a Nigerian, and I always say it everywhere. And I think they just popular thing people say if you go to any country and if they go Nigeria, then you better leave that country. So it is amazing thing to be a Nigerian. I always say that. But I think that the foundation is to see that because we are the most not represented community of people, and the better person to do is not just somebody else, but we as you know the honor of this culture, the honor of this belief, are the best persons to put ourselves on the global map, and that tells a lot about loving our own and supporting our own. There was a time after I went to pitch an idea to a big organization. The funny thing, this organization is in Nigeria actually. So when I got there, we were just having conversations. I, told them about experiences of what happened when the black persons leave Nigeria to the Western world, how they've been treated because of their skin. And the response I got was like, it doesn't matter. Now the world is focused on climate change. That's what we're focused on right now. And then I realized that, okay, we really have a lot of work to do, because I realized that, in as much as you think you talk about climate change, you wouldn't be talking about climate change if you're not given the opportunity in quote to talk about climate change. And that is just taking your grounds to talk about something that you believe in and representing the community. So what I do is most importantly is to ensure that not just myself, that everyone that looks like me, when they go out of the space, right, they are being treated fairly, they are being, listened to, they are being given the attention that they deserve. So I think that's why I do what I do from the standpoint of where I am right now, to give everybody that fairness, that equality through, visual creation.
Hmm. I think there's a responsibility to your work, and it's really great to see how you take that seriously, so to say. I think that there's a responsibility in carrying people's stories and visibilizing people in spaces where previously they've been erased or ignored. And whoever said climate change is the only thing we care about, well, climate change also very much intersects with health, and health inequity remains one of the most urgent problems and challenges of our time. And we live in a world that is so deeply interconnected that there are aspects of even something like climate and sustainability where we look at climate justice and think, "Oh, this intersects with our well-being, this intersects with our health, and also the care we receive or the care we do not receive." So, yeah, thank you for doing the work and for speaking up and creating representation for so many of us. And I think that work is incredibly valued. Um, I often think about your art as a form of intervention, and your work has been an intervention for me. I know it has been an intervention for so many other people as well. But I wonder what illustration has healed for you that medicine could not, and also what it has taught you about yourself and the kind of world you're trying to create.
Ooh, that's some serious questions. Yeah.
I like serious questions, Chidiebere.
Yeah. So, yeah, what art has healed for me? I wasn't really a very patient person. You know, I, it was a struggle for me. I'm a perfectionist, or I was a perfectionist. I'm still trying to let that go. I thought that art was about perfection, but then when I, through my work as an illustrator, realized that not necessarily. Art is about beauty, as about communication is about, it's how it communicates to the person looking at it. When I created the Black Fetus illustration, I did not like the illustration. Like, I wasn't appreciative of it. What I mean is this, because when I was, because I do that with a computer mouse, so it was difficult to have good lines, to have good shading. So the way the image was in my mind wasn't coming out. So I was like, I don't like this artwork. I'm just gonna post it anyway. But I would tell you, it's the most beautiful piece right now that whenever I look at it from my wall, I'm like, this is so beautiful. So you see, my concept about perfection has changed over time, and not just about how I approach people. I'm not a perfect being myself, but then I wanted people to be perfect around me. It wasn't a good thing to do, because I wanted people to be careful of what they say, of how they do things, and it kind of make people around me very meticulous. People were not comfortable expressing themselves around me anymore, because I want this perfection of people around me. And it was very toxic. And I'm not ashamed to acknowledge my wrongs, you know. But then art has redefined that concept of perfectionism, accepting things the way they are and seeing the beauty in it. It has been the greatest change in my life, That's been the greatest change. And all thanks to art for teaching me that. So it goes to say that art, not just the thing of beauty, but the thing of lesson, the thing of moral perspective, teaching us life lesson, building us character and virtues, which is important to navigating through life journey. So art has really done that for me. And I would say in the world of medicine, it also shows that there is no limitation to the thing that our minds can achieve. Back then I was, thinking of how can I juxtapose, art and medicine. I mean, wanting to be a good doctor and wanting to be a great artist, are two extreme areas that where you have to forfeit one for the other. I had time where people were like, okay, why not just leave illustration, focus on medicine? For me, these are two important fields in my life, and both of them are important. The good thing about arts in medicine is that when I'm studying, I get to conceptualize these things, and they kind of stick to my brain. And I think there was a research that talked about integrating art into medical curricula, where medical students should at least be taught art at least once in their process of being a medical student, because art kind of just it not just teaches you a good hand-eye coordination, it teaches you how to approach patient also. So ultimately, it has kind of like shaped my life in the medical perspective, in my personal well-being as a human, and I think it feels good to be a good artist. Yeah.
I love this for you. And as you were saying, I was thinking, yeah, that must be super cool for taking exams because when you're studying, you can just like visibly see all those things. Yeah, that's quite nice. That's like a superpower, you know? I'd love to have, like back when I was in school, that I could just like see it in pictures and images. That's gorgeous. Um, so I kind of want to look at, themes around, I mean, you shared a bit with us around, the legacy you hope for in terms of when all of this is said and done. I think, I mean, I know you're quite young, but I also know that you've also created so much regardless for so many people. So there's that legacy. So I'm just excited to see what comes for you with time, which I know will be remarkable. But I do want to ask you, this is a question I ask most guests. Like, if younger Chidiebere could see you now, what would he love? What would leave him in a state of awe?
Hmm. I think everything, because I'm not just a definition of grace. I'm also a definition of someone who his entire life has been changed mentally, physically, communication wise. I was born a stutterer. So I didn't know how to hold good conversation with people. I didn't know how to express myself without stuttering. So seeing that I could have conversations, I could go on stage and talk to great people and not stutter is a big change in my life. I think my first public speaking engagement was my TED Talk, which was in Switzerland, which I never knew I would ever be on such stage. Well, the intriguing thing was that when I was young, I had a diary where I wrote something I called the cycle of life, most of the cycle of my life. So I drew a circle, I wrote the age I was then. At age 22, I want to be this, I want to have this. I wrote somewhere that I want to be a TEDx speaker. That was years back. And when that happened, I realized that, oh, I'm literally living the dreams, the thing that I prayed for. That is something to be so grateful for. As I always say, you know, growth is a constant process. I'm not there yet. I'm still growing. I'm still evolving, you know. But I would say that every area of my life has been changed, and so my younger self would be so proud of who I've become right now. And yeah, I don't like writing, but it's amazing that most times I get to do things that I don't love doing. And because I've published a book, I have another book I intend publishing. But then back then I was like, I don't like writing. But then I realized that another way to share what you have to the world is by putting it down in pen and paper, letting the world to read. So whether I love it or not, I have to write.
I think along with young Chidebere, a lot of your aunties and people across the world, like even those of us who don't know you, are just like, yay, we're proud of you too. And I think it's a good reminder of dreaming and actioning what you were called for, right? Because as you say, you wrote down quite a number of things that you want to do and probably just packed it away. But in some capacity, like you're living intentionally, consciously, and somehow you end up where you need to be. And then when that opportunity shows up, you lean in. So you don't like to write, but you've published a book, which I will also link because I have also ordered the book and I can't wait to like get into it. Um, but I think this also reminds me of the power of dreaming and then feeling the fear, the discomfort, and then doing it anyway. Because as you say, it is true. Like sometimes we need to write ourselves into history. We need to draw ourselves into history. We need to draw ourselves into, medical journals or even changing the way people are seen. So that so much of that resonates with me. And I also feel like I can talk to you forever. But I do want to ask you kind of like a final question here around legacy and impact. So, what legacy do you hope to leave? Because you have an interesting intersection, right? You are at an intersection of art, medicine, and social justice. And those are big things, but you exist at that intersection. What legacy do you hope to leave?
Well, first, I would say something that my friend always say, that is, it's possible to do great things from small places. The legacy I want to leave is to tell people that no matter where you are in the part of the world, the globe, there are no limitations to the things you can achieve. And for me, being in Nigeria, being in Akwa Ibom State in particular, which is a very small state, to do that illustration which went viral, or something I would never imagine. So it is one legacy I want to leave, to people, to younger people, to anyone, that there are no limitations. Second, the legacy I want to leave is that in a noisy world where a lot of things are happening, people are giving advice that are unsolicited. You are your only through motivation. You are your only through drive. So legacy I want to leave is to ensure that people, are seeing themselves in the lens of God's eye. How God see them, and how their purpose on earth is important. And also in the area of medicine, the area of social justice and art, in years to come, when textbooks will diversify, when we have a lot of diverse illustration, and we'll have and when people would Google Hitras and they see diverse images, there will be a trace back to someone who started this, who led this great change in the healthcare space. And it's gonna be exciting for me that I see this great change happening in my time. That's the kind of legacy I want to see. That people feel confident in their skin. So I would say, um, my legacy is not much actually. I just want to see a world where everyone is living a life where they deserve, and the life where they are seen. And I think it's gonna make me happy. Yeah, I'm happy to be driving this change, but the change doesn't end with me. People need to continue the job, need to continue the journey, and yeah.
Hmm. I just want to say that oof, you've already trailblazed, right? You're pioneer, you're a mover and shaker, as we like to say in Nigeria. That you're shaking rings. And
Yeah, I know.
I think it's so brilliant. It's so important. It's and what is also coming up for me based on what you said is just the mind is, and I love this saying, the mind is a one battleground that we cannot afford to lose. Like people can say what they want, but at the end of the day, we have to have that conviction within self to move in the direction of our purpose. And I think that you are a remarkable example of that. So when you say you don't have much legacy, honey, like your legacy is legacying, right? It's like it's here, it's done, it's written in stone, not in ink that can be washed away. It's in stone. And I think it's giving people permission to ask to see themselves in the spaces that they have to engage in because health is so important. We all need good health. We all need health care
Right.
from one reason to the next. So thank you for that word. Thank you for the legacy that is already written in stone. And I'm so excited to be here for, the journey that comes ahead. And yeah, thank you. I'm so happy for this conversation. Thank you for spending time with me. This has been absolutely lovely. And of course, knowing you, I knew this was going to be great, but thank you so much, Chidiebere. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I think it's safe to say it's probably one of the best podcasts I've had. Because it's organic, it's out of the norm, not very usual questions, and I think it makes me think. and to bring out answers from deep down within, where they're hidden. And I think it's an amazing podcast, and I look forward to listening to you when it's out. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for that feedback. I appreciate it. So, thanks again and talk to you soon. Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.